Hey, good morning. So we are in Romans 1:14. Normally a verse like this I would just like skip over if I'm just reading, but when you're forced to go verse by verse and read the entirety of the Greek and to look up the origin of the words and cross references, it actually means something. So Romans 1:14 marks a transition in Paul's introduction. So in verses 8 through 13 he expresses desire to visit Rome. Now he explains why he longs to come. So not personal comfort or prestige or recognition. Paul views himself as a debtor, not financially but spiritually. He received the gospel of God's grace. He recognized that he's been trusted with this divine stewardship to proclaim it to every kind of person. So this verse reveals Paul's understanding of God's calling, the universal scope of the gospel, and the heart that should characterize every believer who has received God's grace. Now, what he's going to say is so contrary to the culture of the day. I mean, it's so contrary to the way Roman culture was. Roman culture was so divided, so many classes, everybody looked down on everybody. And so what he's going to say is groundbreaking. So here we go. I am under obligation. So Paul owes a debt. He has this responsibility to fulfill. The root word of iletes, of iletes. It literally means to owe, and it comes from the root of filio. So anyway, so notice he does not owe God something. Notice he does not owe God salvation. He doesn't owe mankind salvation. He has been freely given God's grace, and he's become obligated to faithfully deliver the message God trusted him. So this is the language of stewardship, and that word is steward, right? The oikonomio dispensation. They would have understood this language back then. It's part of their culture, this stewardship, when someone entrusts you with something. 1 Corinthians 9:16-17. Paul says, "Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel." So Paul understood that God had given him a responsibility. 1 Corinthians 4:1-2. It is required of stewards that they be found faithful. The obligation is not to earn grace. The obligation is to faithfully proclaim grace. Next phrase, both to the Greeks, Hellesin, like the Hellenistic, right? Really means, it means Greek, but also Greek-speaking people or those influenced by Greek culture. There was that concept called Hellenism, where Alexander the Great tried to spread, not just take over people, but spread the culture, the language, the education. So this word for Greeks, you really think not so much a person from Greece, but a civilized, educated person influenced by Greek philosophy, literature, language, and learning. And to the barbarians. Interesting word. This basically means foreigners or non-Greek speakers, or those outside of Greek culture. So yes, I know they're in the Roman Empire, but the previous empire of Greece had influenced the world so much that it was like the Greek, they were really culturally Greek, but Roman in government. So the word barbaros, let's just say. The word originated because the foreign languages sounded to the Greek ears like bar, bar, bar. So when someone was speaking another language, to the Greeks it sounded like bar, bar, bar. So that's where they got the word barbarian from. So, anyway, originally it just simply meant someone who didn't speak Greek, but later it often implied someone who was viewed as uncultured or uneducated. So Paul is intentionally removing this social distinction. So next phrase, both to the wise, the sophists, right? That's wisdom. To the wise, those learned, educated, intellectuals, philosophers. These would be the scholars and educated members of society. And then to the foolish, okay, the unlearned, the simple, without education. Not necessarily like morally foolish, but just those considered intellectually unsophisticated. So Paul intentionally covers like every area category of humanity. So, Paul viewed his apostleship as a position of privilege. He never viewed it as a position of privilege. He views it as a responsibility that Jesus entrusted him with. He, just preached the gospel to everybody. It wasn't exclusive. Greeks, barbarians, wise, foolish. They represent everyone. So look, let's wrap this up. So Paul views himself as a steward entrusted with the gospel, not as someone seeking personal honor. His debt was the responsibility to faithfully proclaim the message of God's grace. The gospel is for everyone, regardless of culture, education, or social standing. The barriers that divide humanity have no place in the proclamation of the gospel. Every believer who has received God's grace should view the gospel not merely as a personal blessing, but a message entrusted to us to faithfully share with others. Have a great day. God bless.